The day I pulled her out of the water, I didn't think about the rules. I thought about how cold her skin felt in my arms, and how her eyes fluttered like she was caught between two worlds. If I'd hesitated even a few more seconds, she would have slipped under for good. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon. The kind of slow shift where the hum of the pool filters and the echo of laughter were the only reminders that life kept moving. Parents chatted in deck chairs, chlorine stung the air, and sunlight danced on the surface like it was trying to look innocent. I'd been fixing a faulty drain cover near the shallow end, minding my own business. Just another day trying to make sure the place didn't fall apart. Then I heard it, a splash too heavy, followed by that silence no one mistakes for fun. I looked up and saw her, a young woman in the deep end, arms thrashing, head going under. The lifeguard on duty was across the pool, distracted, whistling at a group of kids running near the lockers. I didn't think. I just moved. Boots still on, I dove in. The shock of cold water slammed my body like a wall, but I pushed through, cutting through the blue haze toward her. She wasn't moving anymore by the time I reached her, her limbs loose, her hair floating like dark smoke. I hooked my arm under hers and kicked hard, lungs burning, every stroke fueled by one simple thought. Not today. By the time I dragged her to the edge, people had started to gather. Someone screamed for help. The lifeguard finally noticed, sprinting over with panic in his eyes. I laid her flat on the wet tiles, water spilling from her lips. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with a silver necklace that caught the light as I started compressions. "Come on," I whispered, pressing down on her chest, counting under my breath. My heart hammered faster than hers did. "Come back," she gasped, a sound that cracked through the chaos, and her body jerked as she coughed up water. I sat back, soaked, shaking, watching her chest rise and fall again. That was all I needed to see. The paramedics came minutes later. I told them what happened. They said I did everything right. Quick, clean, effective. She'd be fine. They loaded her onto a stretcher, her eyes half open, dazed. I thought that was it. Just another story no one would remember. But I'd remember her face. That fragile, almost embarrassed look people get when life gives them a second chance. I went home late that night, uniform still damp. My daughter, Ellie, was sitting on the couch, her homework spread across the coffee table, cartoons playing in the background. She looked up, smiled, and said, "You look tired, Dad." "Long day," I said, forcing a small grin. But a good one. I didn't tell her what happened. Not yet. Some things sit better in silence until they find their shape. I took a long shower, let the water wash off the chlorine, the adrenaline, and the quiet ache in my shoulders. When I lay down that night, I thought about how strange life was, how one moment can shift everything without asking permission. What I didn't know was that my life had already changed. I just hadn't opened the envelope yet. The next morning, I found it waiting on my locker at work, a thin white envelope with my name typed neatly on the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a termination letter. Effective immediately. I stared at it for a long time, reading the words twice, 3 times, trying to find the joke hidden in the lines. Violation of physical contact policy with a guest, it said. Failure to adhere to emergency response protocol. My hands trembled, not from fear, but disbelief. I walked straight to the manager's office, still holding the paper like it was a mistake I could hand back. "Tom," I said, keeping my voice calm. "This has to be a mistake." Tom was a man who loved clipboards more than people. He glanced up from his computer, adjusting his glasses. "It's not, Mark. We reviewed the footage. You entered the pool without authorization and made physical contact with a guest. Liability issue." "She was drowning, Tom." He sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "You're not trained for water rescue. You're maintenance. You could have made things worse. If she'd been injured, or if you had, we'd be facing a lawsuit." I stared at him, the words slow to settle. So saving her life was wrong because it wasn't on paper? He didn't answer, just slid a final paycheck across the desk. "You're a good worker, Mark. But rules are rules." I walked out without another word. Some silences aren't from fear. They're from realizing there's no point arguing with people who've never been tested by real life. Outside, the sun was blinding. Kids still laughed in the shallow end, splashing water that glittered like glass. I watched the lifeguard stand a little straighter now, eyes on the pool for once. Maybe I'd done something right after all, even if the company thought otherwise. That night, After Ellie went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the pink slip folded beside my coffee mug. Bills piled up on the counter. My mind replayed the rescue in slow motion. Her limp body, her breath returning, the sound of her coughing back to life. And then that white envelope. I told myself I'd find another job. I'd always been the kind of man who fixed things. Pipes, engines, even problems that didn't have manuals. But that night, for the first time in a long while, I felt something I didn't know how to repair, the cost of doing the right thing. I didn't know it yet, but fate wasn't finished with me. Sometimes the people we save end up saving us right back, just not in the way we expect. After the firing, mornings got quieter. No alarm blaring at 5:30, no smell of chlorine stuck to my clothes, no steady rhythm of footsteps echoing on the pool deck. Instead, I'd wake up to the creak of the old ceiling fan in my apartment and the soft sound of Ellie humming while she packed her school bag. She was 11, sharp, kind, and far too observant for her age. I guess that's what happens when life gives you a single parent and not much else. You learn to read moods instead of words. "Dad," she said one morning, peeking around the corner of my room. "You're not going to work again?" I forced a smile. "Not today, kiddo. Got a few things to figure out first." She nodded, trying to act casual, but I saw the small frown pull at her lips before she went back to buttering toast. Kids don't need to understand the details to know when something's off. I spent the next few days driving around town, dropping off resumes. The smell of stale coffee filled my truck, and the passenger seat was a graveyard of folded job listings. Handyman gigs, night janitor shifts, warehouse maintenance. I wasn't picky. I just needed something that paid the bills and kept me home in time to make dinner. But every door I knocked on ended with the same polite shake of the head or an apologetic, "We'll call you." And they never did. By the end of the week, I stopped counting how many no's I'd heard. What I did count were the dollars left in my checking account, fewer every day. That Saturday, Ellie and I drove to the park. I'd promised her ice cream, even though I probably shouldn't have. Money was tight, but I couldn't stand the idea of her seeing worry in everything we did. We sat on a bench under a cottonwood tree. She had chocolate smeared on her chin, her legs swinging as she talked about school projects and a science fair she wanted to enter. I nodded, pretending to listen, but part of me was far away, thinking about rent, utilities, job boards. "Dad," she said suddenly, looking up, "you're not really sad, right? You always tell me things happen for a reason." That line caught me. She'd used my own words against me, or maybe for me. I smiled faintly and wiped the chocolate off her face with a napkin. "You're right, kiddo. Things happen for a reason. Sometimes it just takes a while to see what that reason is." She nodded like she believed it. I wasn't sure I did. Evenings were the hardest. Once Ellie went to bed, the silence in the apartment felt heavier than usual. The kitchen light buzzed faintly, the clock ticked like it was mocking me, and the faint hum of the refrigerator was the only sound that kept me company. I'd scroll through job listings on my phone, the glow of the screen painting my face pale blue. Maintenance technician, pool repair, building engineer. It was like the same posting kept following me in circles: experience required, benefits negotiable, low pay guaranteed. Sometimes I'd find myself thinking about the pool, about that afternoon, the slap of my boots hitting the water, the look in her eyes when she gasped her first breath, the silence afterward, the kind that wraps around you and says, "You did something that mattered." Then I'd think about Tom, that smug voice behind the desk, the phrase "liability issue," ringing in my ears like a joke I wasn't in on. It made me angry, not the firing itself, but the message behind it. That doing the right thing wasn't good enough anymore if it didn't fit some policy binder. By the second week, I picked up part-time work fixing HVAC units for a friend named Carl. It was rough pay, but it kept my hands busy and my mind off things. Carl was a talker. One of those guys who could turn a 2-minute update into a 15-minute sermon about how the world used to be. He'd been around long enough to see decency turn into paperwork. "World's gone soft," he said one day, wiping sweat from his neck as we stood on a hot rooftop. "Used to be, if a man saved a life, folks threw him a parade. Now they throw him a pink slip." I chuckled, but it wasn't funny. "Yeah, well, parades don't pay rent either." Carl gave me a side look. "You'll land on your feet, Mark. Guys like you always do. You've got that old school conscience people talk about, but rarely have." I nodded, unsure whether that was a compliment or a diagnosis. One evening, about 3 weeks after the firing, I got a letter in the mail from the city office. For a moment, my heart jumped. Maybe it was an apology or a review of my termination. It wasn't. It was a notice about the pool reopening under new management. Rebranding initiative, it said. Community first approach. New leadership starting next month. I laughed under my breath. Community first. That word had been buried under policy memos long before I was ever hired. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I looked up the company name online. The press release said the parent corporation had been acquired by a private group. New funding, new direction. A renewed focus on safety and staff integrity. Irony has a strange sense of humor. That night, I sat on the balcony, a cold beer sweating in my hand, and thought about everything. About how life turns on invisible hinges. One day you're fixing broken drains, the next you're the one drowning in your own thoughts. Ellie came out with her blanket wrapped around her shoulders. You okay, Dad? I looked at her, the way the porch light caught the gold in her hair, and smiled softly. Yeah, just thinking. About the pool? I hesitated. Yeah, about the pool. She yawned and leaned her head on my arm. Maybe they'll hire you back. They should. You're a hero. That word made me pause. Hero. It didn't feel right. I hadn't done anything any decent person wouldn't have done. Maybe, I said. But sometimes the world doesn't need heroes, kiddo. It needs reminders. Reminders of what? I looked out into the quiet street, where the streetlights flickered against the darkness. That decency still matters. Even when it costs you. She didn't say anything. She just squeezed my arm, and that was enough. The weeks rolled on, slow but steady. Bills still came, work stayed scarce, and every so often I'd think about that girl from the pool, wondering if she was okay, if she even remembered the man who pulled her out. I didn't expect to ever see her again. But life has a way of circling back, especially when you've made peace with letting go. Because a month later, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, there was a knock on my door, firm, polite, and unfamiliar. When I opened it, I didn't recognize her right away. She wasn't in a swimsuit this time. She was in a navy blazer, hair neatly pulled back, eyes steady and confident. Mr. Mark Jensen? She asked, her voice calm but certain. I nodded, unsure. That's me. She smiled faintly. You probably don't remember me, but I remember you. And that's when I realized I did remember her. The girl from the pool. The one I'd pulled from the deep end. Only now, she wasn't drowning. She was standing on my doorstep, and I had no idea what kind of wave she was about to bring with her. She stood there with a kind of steady patience that made me straighten my shoulders without thinking. Morning light spilled down the hallway, catching in the gold rim of a small pin on her lapel, a wave cresting inside a circle. I noticed the details the way men do when they've had to fix things for a living. The slight scuff on her heels, the careful braid of her hair, the way she held a leather folder to her chest like it mattered. Maya, she said. Maya Torres. Her mouth tightened just a little. You pulled me out of the water. I didn't know what to do with my hands, so I set them on the doorframe. Somewhere behind me, the coffee maker clicked itself off, and the apartment filled with the faint smell of dark roast and dish soap. How are you? I asked, and it came out softer than I meant. Alive, she said, with a trace of a smile. Because of you. We stood there for a beat too long. I could hear Ellie moving around in her room, the low scratch of a zipper, a humming tune she played with her mouth when she tied her shoes. I stepped back. Do you want to come in? I've got coffee. Maya glanced down the hallway like she was measuring the time. If you have a minute, she said. We sat at my small kitchen table. 2 mugs, a chipped sugar bowl, a stack of unpaid bills turned face down. She set her folder between us and didn't open it. I read about the termination, she said, looking me straight in the eye. I'm sorry. That shouldn't have happened. Something in my chest went tight, and then looser, like a knot deciding what to do. It did, I said. Companies keep themselves clean by keeping people small. It's not your fault. It kind of is, she said quietly. At least now it is. She opened the folder. Inside was a printed press release, the one I'd already seen about the acquisition, and a short memo with my name in a bold header. Beneath it, incident footage reviewed. Employee terminated for breach of policy. There was a thumb drive taped to the corner. I'm the new general director, Maya said. The parent company brought me in to rebuild operations and culture. We reviewed every incident from the last year as part of the transition. Yours stood out. Stood out. I repeated, like I was testing a tool I hadn't used in a while. She nodded. It was the only one where following the rules would have led to a death. The clock over the stove ticked in the pause that followed. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past, brakes whining. I took a sip of coffee and set it down carefully. "What do you want from me?" I asked. Maya looked at her hands, then back up. "To start with, I wanted to meet you and say thank you without an ambulance between us." She let herself breathe. "But I'm here for more than that." Ellie patted out then, hair half-brushed, backpack hanging off one shoulder. She stopped when she saw Maya, eyes darting between us. "Morning," Ellie said, polite in that way kids are when they don't know how fancy a person is. "Morning," Maya replied, warm and easy. "I'm a friend of your dad's. He saved my life." Ellie looked at me like I'd kept a secret from her, which I had. "You pulled her out?" I nodded. "Deep end." Ellie's mouth made a small O. "Did you do the chest presses like we practiced on the teddy bear?" A smile tugged at the corner of Maya's mouth. "He did them right," she said. "Very right." I cleared my throat. "Go brush the rest of your hair, kiddo. I'll drive you today." When Ellie disappeared, I faced Maya again. "You were saying?" "I want you back," she said. "Not just as maintenance. I want you to help me rewrite the safety and response standards from the ground up. Real-world protocols. Training that makes sense. Culture that puts decency before paperwork." I felt the old anger flicker. The memory of Tom sliding a paycheck across a desk like he was paying me to stop existing. "Your policy is the thing that tossed me out," I said. "Same shirts, different logo." Maya didn't flinch. "That's fair. But it won't change unless somebody who's been on the ground helps change it." She tilted her head. "You don't strike me as a man who leaves a job half-finished." I rubbed my thumb across the mug's handle. That was a line that knew where to land. "Before you say yes or no," she added, "come walk the pool with me. Today. See what we're doing. See what I'm trying to undo." I studied her face. No sales pitch eyes. No PR varnish. She looked like someone who had swallowed a scare and digested it into purpose. I knew that look. People wear it after funerals and close calls. It says I'm not promising a miracle, just sweat. "I'll take Ellie to school," I said. "Then I'll meet you there." Maya exhaled, like she hadn't wanted to push. She slid a business card across the table. The same wave in a circle logo. General Director. A number. A signature you could actually read. 11 o'clock, she said. "I'll have a visitor badge waiting." She stood, gathered her folder, and glanced toward the hallway where Ellie's door clicked shut. "Your daughter seems like a good kid." "She is," I said, feeling that rising mix of pride and protectiveness. "She's the reason I make dinner before 6 and fix everything I can with my hands before I try to fix it with my mouth." A soft laugh. "That sounds like something my father would have said." She went quiet, then extended her hand. It was steady and warm. "Thank you, Mark, for what you did, for being the kind of man who didn't wait for permission." She left, and the apartment felt bigger without her in it. Ellie emerged holding a hairbrush like a microphone. "Dad," she said, careful, "are we okay?" "We're okay," I said. I meant it. "We might go back to the pool today, just to look around." Her eyebrows lifted. "Like spies." I grinned. "Like inspectors." She thought about it, then nodded, satisfied. "You're the boss of pipes," she announced, as if she'd just given me a title I could put on a business card. Something like that. On the drive to school, she fiddled with the radio until she landed on an oldie station she likes because the singers sound honest. The morning was clear, the kind of blue that makes you think things can be set right with a good wrench and the right amount of torque. Outside the school, kids dragged backpacks bigger than their torsos. Teachers waved like airport marshalers. Ellie squeezed my hand before she hopped out. "Hey," she said, face close to mine. "If you go back to the pool, don't let them make you feel small." "I won't," I said. I watched her vanish into the stream of bodies, then sat there a minute longer than I needed to. The truck idled with that low throat hum I've always found patient. A school bell rang, clear and simple. I checked the time. 10:22. I pulled away. The pool looked familiar and foreign all at once. The faded city logo was gone, replaced by fresh paint and clean signage. The parking lot lines were repainted, bright as chalk. The air carried that same slap of chlorine, but it didn't feel tired anymore. At the entrance, a young woman at a table flipped through a clipboard and handed me a visitor badge. "Ms. Torres is expecting you," she said. I stepped onto the deck and felt the echo hit me, the way sound moves in a tiled cathedral. The deep end roped off. New safety placards with large type and plain words. Lifeguards clustered with a trainer, whistles hanging like punctuation. The water winked under the lights. Maya met me near the pump room door. No blazer this time. A navy polo, rolled sleeves, hair tied back with a no-nonsense band. The folder was gone. She carried a legal pad and a pencil that already had bite marks. "You came," she said. "I did. We walked the perimeter." She didn't talk at me. She asked, "Where are your eyes when you're fixing a drain and kids are running? If an alarm blares and the lifeguard is on the far stand, what's the fastest triangulation? What should the janitor do if he's first to a fall?" Her questions felt like handholds. No gotchas, just the search for a better answer. We stopped at the deep end. I stood there longer than I meant to, looking into the blue that had once swallowed her. That afternoon replayed. The weight of her body, the cough, the relief that felt like heat rising through cold. Maya watched me. "It doesn't go away," she said, not as a question. "No," I admitted. "You store it. Like a tool you hope you won't need again." She nodded. "I keep seeing the ceiling. The sound when you breathe again after you think you won't. It's ugly and beautiful at the same time." We were quiet. The trainer's whistle chirped. A child laughed, and then apologized for laughing too loudly, the way kids do when rules are new. "Tom's still here?" I asked. "Tom is in transition," she said carefully. "I kept him for continuity, but he won't be leading staff anymore." She turned the pencil in her fingers. "I'm not asking you to come back under him. I wouldn't. I let that settle. If I come back, I'm not signing on to be a poster boy," I said. "No staged photos. No Hero Saves the Day campaign to sell new memberships." "I don't want a hero," Maya said. "I want a standard. People forget the difference." I breathed out. The room smelled like bleach and wet tile and the faint sugary ghost of some spilled sports drink. The exact cocktail of my old life. "Okay," I said. "Show me the pump room. If I'm going to build something, I want to see the bones." We pushed through the heavy door. The sound changed. All thrum and hiss. The comfort of machinery doing its job. Metal grated underfoot. The big sand filters loomed like sleeping giants. I ran my hand along a pipe joint and felt residue that told me it had been tightened recently, but not cleaned. A small thing, but the small things are where accidents live. "Who's maintaining this?" I asked. "Interim contractor," Maya said. "We're hiring." I nodded at the word. Hiring. It warmed the air a degree. She caught my eye. "I want you to write the first draft of a real emergency protocol," she said. "Not from a boardroom. From here. From the deck. From what people can actually do when seconds matter." I thought about Ellie's face that morning. "Don't let them make you feel small." "Draft it," I said. "On one condition." "What's that?" "I want to test it with the people who'll use it. The overnight janitor. The front desk kid. The lifeguard who's 18 and scared but trying. And I want every line to pass the would my daughter understand this test." Maya's smile wasn't bright. It was relieved. "Deal." We stood there, two people with sleeves rolled, listening to the steady heartbeat of the system. "Mark," she said after a moment, voice low, "there's another thing." I waited. "I can give you your job back today. But what I'm offering isn't your old job. It's a say." She swallowed. "And saying yes might mean walking past the man who wrote your termination letter. It might mean the staff hears 5 different versions of your story before lunch. It might mean you take a risk on me." I looked around the pump room. The gauge needles. The chalk marks on the cinder block where someone had measured something and forgotten to wipe it away. The unglamorous truth of how things stay safe. "I've taken bigger risks," I said. "Besides," I tapped the gauge and watched the needle quiver into the green. "This is where I'm useful." She nodded, and for the first time that morning, her shoulders unclenched. We walked back toward the deck. On the far wall, a new sign had been mounted at eye level. "Emergency response starts with the first person who notices." I read it twice. It was just words, but so was the letter that ended my job. Words make things and unmake them. The trick is who gets to write them. 11 o'clock tomorrow, Maya said as we reached the exit. "I'll have the team in the classroom. You'll have the floor." I hesitated, not from doubt, but from a feeling like standing on the edge of a high dive. Not fear of falling, but respect for the height. "I'll be here," I said. Back in the truck, I sat with my hands on the wheel until the fan kicked on. My phone buzzed. A text from Ellie. "How'd it go?" Then a second later, "Did you spy good?" I typed, "Better than spy. Building something." Her reply came with a strand of confetti emojis she uses when there isn't a word big enough. I smiled, left the phone face down on the seat, and listened to the hum of the engine settle. Somewhere behind me, inside those walls, a woman I'd dragged from water was trying to pull a whole place to the surface. And for the first time in weeks, I felt the surface under my feet, too. The next morning, I got up before sunrise. Old habit, the kind that never really leaves a man who's worked maintenance shifts most of his life. The coffee pot clicked, the smell of roasted beans filled the kitchen, and I stared out the window at the slow bloom of dawn across the rooftops. Ellie shuffled out in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "You're up early," she mumbled. "First day back?" I said, and that word, back, felt both strange and steady on my tongue. Her eyes brightened. "They hired you again?" I nodded, buttoning my shirt. "Sort of. Different role this time." She grinned and leaned against the counter. "Told you heroes always win." "Not heroes," I said, adjusting my collar. "Just people who keep showing up." By the time I pulled into the pool's lot, the sky was wide awake. The building looked the same, glass doors, gray tiles, but it felt different. The front desk clerk smiled, and actually meant it. The lifeguard seemed attentive, and someone had placed potted plants near the lobby. Small touches, but small things tell you everything. Inside the classroom, about a dozen staff members sat at folding tables. Lifeguards, janitors, part-timers. Tom was there too, arms crossed, the kind of half-smile that looks like it's missing an apology. Maya stood beside a whiteboard, calm but purposeful. "Everyone," she said, "this is Mark Jensen. Some of you might know his name already. He's here to help us rebuild how we respond to emergencies. Not from policy, but from experience." There was a murmur. Some curious, some skeptical. Tom didn't say a word. I stepped forward, holding a folder I'd worked on all night. Pages of handwritten notes, flowcharts, and real-world responses. "Morning," I said. My voice carried steady low. "I'm not here to give a lecture. I'm here because once, I jumped into the deep end without permission, and it cost me my job." The room went still. "But here's the thing," I continued. "If I hadn't, someone would have died. So today, we're going to talk about what matters more, paperwork or people." A few heads nodded. Maya folded her arms and watched me with quiet pride. I walked them through the timeline of that day. The noise, the moment of realization, the lack of response, the seconds that counted. I showed them how proximity matters more than role, how human instinct can be the first responder long before a whistle blows. "Sometimes," I said, pointing to the new sign on the wall, "being the one who notices isn't about training. It's about caring enough to act." Tom's voice cut through the room then, sharp, tight. "And if something goes wrong, who takes responsibility, Mark? You? The janitor? The 16-year-old kid working the front desk?" I looked at him evenly. "We all do. That's what responsibility is, shared, not shifted." He frowned, but I saw Maya's eyes glint. After the session, the team lingered to ask questions. Some offered stories of close calls. Others asked if I could show them CPR properly. By the time the last lifeguard left, I could feel something different in the air, not change yet, but the scent of it, faint and real. Tom stayed behind. "You think you're some kind of savior, huh?" he muttered. "No," I said. "I think I'm a man who did what needed doing when no one else moved." He exhaled through his nose, the kind of sound meant to belittle. "You got lucky. That girl could have died, and we'd be in court. You think that's heroism?" I stepped closer, not aggressive, just clear. "I think heroism is doing what's right even when it costs you. And for what it's worth, she didn't die, she lived." Maybe that bothers you because it makes the rules look small. For a second, something cracked in his expression, maybe guilt, maybe pride curdling into shame. He grabbed his clipboard and walked out. Later that afternoon, Maya found me by the pump room, tightening a valve. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching. "I heard the exchange," she said quietly. "You handled him better than I would have." "Old habit," I said, twisting the wrench. "You learn not to argue with people who've never been wet past their ankles." She smiled faintly. "You're making waves, Mark. The good kind." "Hope so," I said, setting the wrench down. "But waves don't last unless the tide changes too." She nodded. "That's exactly why I need you here." The next few weeks blurred into rhythm. Morning inspections, training sessions, protocol drafts, late-night edits at my kitchen table while Ellie did her homework beside me. I saw Maya often, at staff meetings, during walkthroughs, sometimes in the break room where she'd sit with the crew instead of hiding in her office. She wasn't like most corporate directors. She listened, she asked questions, and she remembered names. One evening, as we closed up after a safety drill, she sat on the edge of the pool, shoes off, toes dipping into the water. "I keep thinking about that day," she said quietly. "The moment I went under. I remember the silence. The weight." I sat beside her, hands clasped between my knees. "You remember everything when you're that close," I said. "Every thought, every regret, every small thing you didn't finish." She nodded, her voice soft. "That's why I came back. I didn't want my life to be a story about someone who got saved and disappeared. I wanted it to be about what came after." The light from the overhead lamps shimmered across the water, reflecting in her eyes. I didn't say anything for a while. Some silences deserve space. But progress has a way of stirring old resentments. One morning, we came in to find the pump room flooded. A valve had been opened, deliberately. Pressure gauges ruined, floors slick with water. Equipment damage in the thousands. Maya crouched beside the puddle, jaw tight. "This wasn't an accident." "No," I said, inspecting the joint. "Someone wanted to make it look like negligence. Probably mine." She looked at me, concern sharp in her eyes. "You think, Tom?" I hesitated. Wouldn't be the first time a man tried to prove a point with sabotage. We spent the rest of the day cleaning up, documenting, fixing what we could. Maya handled it professionally, but I saw the anger she kept buried behind her calm. That evening, after the staff left, she walked over with 2 cups of coffee. We sat on the equipment crate in the half-lit pump room, the hum of repaired pipes filling the air. "I've dealt with men like him before," she said. "The ones who confuse authority with power." "Authority fades," I said, sipping the bitter coffee. "Power only matters if you use it right." She gave me a long look. "You always talk like that. Only when people are listening." Her laugh was quiet, genuine. "Good. Because tomorrow, we're confronting him." I didn't sleep much that night. The thought of walking into another meeting with the man who'd written me off gnawed at the edge of my calm. But when I closed my eyes, I saw Ellie's face. That proud, knowing look she gave me whenever she thought I was doing something brave. And in that moment, I realized bravery isn't always about the jump. Sometimes it's about standing your ground after you've hit the water. The next morning, the meeting room was tense enough to feel. The walls seemed to hold their breath. Maya sat at the head of the table, posture straight but calm. I took the chair beside her, not as her subordinate, but as someone who'd earned the right to be there. Tom sat across from us, papers in hand, pretending to read them. His jaw worked back and forth like he was chewing through words he couldn't swallow. Around the table sat a few supervisors and senior staff, faces tight with the kind of unease people wear when they know something big is about to shift. Maya began, voice steady. "We're here to review the recent incident in the pump room. Someone tampered with the equipment, causing property damage and safety risk. We have security footage and maintenance logs. Mark and I spent the evening repairing the system." She looked directly at Tom. "Do you have anything to add before we begin?" Tom's lips curved slightly, the kind of smile that hides fear. "Only that the timing is interesting. The man who was fired for a safety violation comes back, and suddenly, things break." I felt the eyes on me, the unspoken suspicion that always finds its way into rooms like this. But I stayed still, calm. "If you're accusing me, Tom," I said quietly, "you should know I don't do half measures. If I break something, I fix it better than it was before." A few small laughs flickered around the table, nervous, but they broke the tension. Maya pressed a key on her laptop, and the TV screen on the wall came to life. Footage rolled from the security camera above the pump room entrance. At 8:57 p.m., the camera showed Tom entering the room, clipboard in hand. At 9:04, he left, glancing up once toward the camera, too aware of it. Then the footage jumped ahead. At 9:20, I arrived. The floor was already slick with water. Maya didn't speak. She didn't need to. The footage said everything. Tom shifted in his seat. "That proves nothing." I was checking inventory. He could have. Maya raised a hand. "Stop. You were seen opening the valve, Tom. We verified it against maintenance logs. No authorization. No notice. You flooded the room and risked shutting down the facility." "What?" He stared at the screen, then at her. "Because he doesn't belong here," he snapped, pointing at me. "He's not management. He's a janitor with a savior complex. and you're letting him rewrite policy like he runs the place. Maya's voice stayed calm. You're wrong. He's a man who saved a life when protocol failed. That's exactly the kind of person who should be writing policy. Tom stood abruptly. You're out of your depth, Maya. You don't know how this place runs. Maybe not before, she said, but I do now. Her tone was so measured it silenced the room. Tom looked around, searching for support that wasn't there. When none came, he grabbed his folder, muttered something under his breath, and stormed out. The door closed with a hollow echo. Silence. Then Maya turned to me. You handled that with grace. I gave a small shrug. Didn't need a fight. Truth's heavier than fists. She smiled. Remind me to put that on a wall somewhere. After the meeting, the staff seemed to move differently. There was something lighter in their steps, like they'd seen what accountability looked like for the first time in a long while. Maya reinstated me formally that afternoon. But more than that, she gave me a title that actually meant something: Safety and Operations Coordinator. I'd be responsible for maintenance, training, and on-deck emergency readiness. A bridge between management and the people who actually kept the place alive. When she handed me the badge, she said, You earned this the day you jumped in. I took it slowly, the metal cool in my palm. This doesn't erase what happened, I said. It's not meant to, she replied. It's meant to build on it. The next few days were busy, a kind of work that filled the hours with purpose. I led hands-on drills with the younger lifeguards, rewrote sections of the emergency manual in plain language, and made sure every maintenance worker knew where every shut-off valve was. The pool felt alive again. Not perfect, just honest. One afternoon, as the sun slanted through the tall windows, I was adjusting a pressure gauge when Maya walked up with 2 coffees. You've been here since dawn, she said, offering me one. Machines don't fix themselves, I said, taking it. But they listen better than most people. She laughed softly. You always talk like a man writing a book no one else has read. Maybe, I said, but I like when someone listens. She leaned against the wall beside me. I didn't just come to thank you again. There's something else. I raised an eyebrow. That usually means I should sit down. She smiled. You should. We're expanding. The board approved a pilot program for community safety training. We'll be hiring coordinators across 3 facilities. I want you to help design it. I blinked, processing that. That's a big step. Big steps start small, she said. I want to build a system that values instinct and integrity as much as procedure. You've lived both. I looked down at the floor, then back at her. You sure about trusting a maintenance guy with something like that? Maya's expression softened. I'm trusting the man who saved my life. Titles don't impress me, Mark. Character does. That silence between us carried more weight than any handshake. Later that evening, I picked up Ellie from her friend's house. She climbed into the truck with her backpack and a grin that stretched wide. You got promoted, didn't you? I laughed. Who told you? Miss Torres came to school, she said proudly. She talked about safety and teamwork. Said my dad was her new right-hand man. I shook my head, smiling. She's exaggerating. Ellie leaned against the seat. She said you taught her something important, that rules don't mean much if they forget people. I looked at the road ahead, the orange glow of sunset stretching across the windshield. She's right. For a moment, we drove in silence. Then Ellie asked, Are you happy, Dad? That one landed deep. I thought about the months of frustration, the humiliation of being fired, the slow crawl back to purpose, the sound of Maya's laugh echoing over the pool. Yeah, I said finally. I think I am. But life, I've learned, doesn't hand you peace without testing if you're ready to keep it. A week later, a letter arrived from the corporate headquarters that used to own the facility. Legal jargon, disclaimers, and a small note. Reemployment under prior termination may affect eligibility for severance compensation. It wasn't about money. It was about principle. They wanted the last word, even after losing control. I showed the letter to Maya. She read it once and said, Let me handle this. I hesitated. You don't owe me that. I do, she said, eyes firm. Because I wouldn't be here without you. And because sometimes, doing right means standing next to the people who did right first. She made a few calls that afternoon. By the next day, the letter was retracted. No apology. Corporations don't apologize, but silence can be its own surrender. That night, I drove home with the windows down, the air cool, the sky bruised with twilight. For the first time since the day I jumped into that pool, I didn't feel like I was swimming against the current anymore. News spreads fast in a small city, faster when it carries a story people actually want to believe in. A few days after the letter incident, Maya called me into her office. She was sitting behind her desk, sunlight washing over the papers scattered like petals. "There's something you should see," she said, turning her laptop toward me. The screen showed a local news article. "Fired employee reinstated after heroic rescue leads to policy reform." Below the headline was a photo of the pool, bright, clean, almost proud. The story talked about a maintenance technician who acted decisively during an emergency and a new management initiative focused on integrity and real-world readiness. My name wasn't printed, but anyone who'd lived here long enough could connect the dots. I leaned back, letting the words sink in. "You did this." Maya shook her head. Reporter reached out after seeing the rebranding posts. "I just told the truth. People deserve to hear when doing right actually matters." I stared at the screen. It didn't feel like vindication. It felt humbling. The kind of thing that quiets you instead of inflating you. "They'll come looking for a quote," I said finally. Maya smiled faintly. "Then give them one worth remembering." The following week, the pool was busier than ever. Parents brought their kids to swim lessons. Older folks came for therapy classes. I walked the deck, clipboard in hand, watching lifeguards run through the new drills I'd written. No one cut corners. No one rolled their eyes at safety protocols anymore. Even Tom's absence went unnoticed, a silence that made the place run smoother. During one of the afternoon sessions, a father stopped me near the gate. "You the guy from the article?" he asked. I hesitated. "Depends what it said." He grinned. "Said you saved that woman and changed how this place runs. My daughter's starting lessons here next week. I just wanted to shake your hand." I accepted it. His grip was firm, honest. "Appreciate that," I said. "Just make sure she listens to the lifeguards." He laughed, waved, and walked off. It was a small moment, the kind that doesn't make headlines, but it landed deeper than anything in the paper. A few days later, Maya and I stood at the back of the facility during a community event, a pool safety open house. She'd set it up to invite the public in, to show them what had changed. Kids splashed in the shallow end while parents watched demonstrations of first aid and rescue response. Maya had a microphone in hand, but she wasn't the kind of leader who talked down to people. Her speech was short, sincere. "We're not here today to talk about mistakes," she said. "We're here to talk about choices, the kind we make in seconds that can save lives. Sometimes rules need rewriting. Sometimes courage looks like defiance." Then she gestured toward me. "I'd like to thank the man who reminded us of that." Quietly, without seeking attention. "Mark Jensen." Applause rippled through the space. I hadn't prepared for that. I nodded awkwardly, not one for the spotlight. "I just did what anyone would do," I said, my voice low but steady. "But maybe that's the point, that we remember how to be anyone again. That we don't wait for permission to care." It wasn't rehearsed, but it landed. I could see people listening, not politely, deeply. That night, after the event, the staff threw an informal dinner in the break room. Pizza boxes stacked high, soda cans clinking, laughter echoing through walls that used to carry tension. I sat with the younger crew, listening to their stories about late-night shifts, bad dates, and dreams that stretched beyond the pool's edge. Maya joined later, hair slightly undone, holding a paper plate she never got around to eating. "You looked like you wanted to run when I handed you that mic," she teased. "Still do," I said, half smiling. "Not my favorite kind of deep water." She laughed, the kind of laugh that makes you realize how long it's been since you've heard joy that simple. Then she got quiet. "You know," she said, "I used to think leadership meant control. But now I think it's about trust. About giving people space to be decent without fear of punishment." "Funny," I said. "I used to think loyalty meant following rules. Now I think it's about knowing which ones are worth breaking." We looked at each other, both understanding the kind of truth that doesn't need more words. The next morning, I found a thank you card taped to my locker. Inside was a folded drawing, a crayon sketch of me pulling someone from the water, done by a kid from one of the swim classes. Beneath it, in crooked handwriting, "Thank you for saving Miss Maya." That one hit me harder than any article or applause ever could. I kept it in my wallet. Still do. Weeks passed, and life found rhythm again. Ellie and I spent weekends fishing by the lake, cooking pancakes on Sunday mornings, laughing about the cat that kept stealing socks from the neighbor's porch. Sometimes, Maya would join us for community events or check-ins. She never acted like a boss, more like someone who'd finally stopped running from her own past. There was respect between us, not romantic, not forced, something quieter, sturdier. Two people who had seen what survival costs and decided to build something better from it. One evening, as I locked up the facility, I found Maya standing alone by the deep end, staring at the calm blue water. "Still thinking about that day?" I asked, stepping beside her. She smiled faintly. "Sometimes. Mostly I just remind myself to breathe." I nodded. "That's good advice." She looked at me, eyes steady. "Mark, can I tell you something?" "Sure." When I was under that water, right before everything went black, I remember thinking, this is it. That's how people disappear. Quietly, into rules and routines and mistakes. And then I felt your hand. That moment changed everything. I don't just mean my life. I mean how I see people, work, responsibility, all of it. Her voice caught just slightly, and she laughed to cover it. "Guess what I'm saying is, thank you doesn't cover it." I met her eyes and said simply, "You don't owe me anything. You just needed to come back up." We both did. She smiled, that tired, grateful kind of smile that only people who've seen the edge can share. By the end of the month, the story had faded from headlines, replaced by the next local drama. But that was fine. The real change had already taken root, in the staff, in the training, in the way people treated each other. And in me, I'd learned something I never expected, that sometimes the reward for doing right isn't recognition. It's the quiet peace of knowing you can still look at yourself in the mirror without flinching. That peace stays longer than any applause. It's strange how life settles after a storm. Not with fireworks, but with small, almost invisible moments of balance returning. Weeks passed, and the noise that once surrounded everything slowly quieted. The pool ran smoothly, staff morale stayed high, and for the first time in years, I woke up each morning without dread waiting at the edge of my bed. I wasn't rich. I wasn't powerful. But I had peace, the kind that shows up when you finally stop apologizing for doing the right thing. One Saturday, Ellie and I drove to the lake outside town. It was late spring, the air warm but still crisp near the water. She brought her sketchbook, and I brought the old fishing rods I hadn't used since before everything happened. She sat on the pier, legs dangling, drawing the ripples as the sun hit the surface. I watched her for a while, her focus, her quiet, and I realized that in saving one stranger, I taught my daughter something I never said out loud. That compassion isn't weakness. It's courage wrapped in calm. "You're smiling," Ellie said, not looking up. "Just thinking," I said. "About work? About life." I paused. "You know, sometimes you think you're losing everything. A job, your reputation, and it feels unfair. But later you see it was just a clearing, making room for what's supposed to come next." She nodded like she understood more than I expected. Miss Maya said something like that when she came to school again. She told us how almost dying made her realize she wanted to help people live better. "That sounds like her," I said, reeling in an empty line. Ellie smiled. "You and her are kind of the same. You fix things that are broken." I chuckled softly. "Maybe, but she's better at the paperwork." That made her laugh, that sweet, unguarded sound I'd missed during the hard months. A few weeks later, Maya asked me to join her for coffee at a small diner near the river. It was the kind of place that still served from glass carafes and smelled like maple syrup even in the afternoon. When I got there, she was already seated in a booth by the window, wearing jeans and a simple sweater. No title, no badge, just herself. "You look tired," I said as I slid into the seat across from her. "Good tired," she said. "The kind that comes from progress." The waitress refilled our mugs without asking. "So," Maya began, stirring her coffee, "the board's officially approved the training program. We'll be expanding statewide in 6 months. They want you to lead the first round." I blinked. "Me?" "You," she confirmed. "You're the heart of it, Mark. You gave this place its conscience back. I can handle the budget and the branding, but I can't fake authenticity. You live it." I leaned back, quiet for a moment. "You ever wonder how much one decision can change everything?" She smiled. "Every day." I looked at her, calm, collected, someone who'd faced her own darkness and turned it into direction. "You've done good work, Maya. Better than anyone before you." She shrugged lightly. "Because I had the right people around me. Because I learned that leadership isn't standing above, it's standing beside." Something in the way she said it hit deep. I nodded slowly. "Then I guess we're both standing in the right place now." She smiled again, soft but genuine. I think we are. We sat there for a while, talking about everything and nothing. The upcoming summer rush, Ellie's science fair project, how the pool had become a symbol of second chances without anyone meaning for it to. When we finally stood to leave, she said something that stayed with me. You know, when you pulled me from that water, I thought you saved my life. But now I realize, you gave me a reason to live it better. I didn't have an answer. I just gave her a small nod and a quiet smile. Sometimes gratitude doesn't need a response. It just needs to be shared in silence. That night, after putting Ellie to bed, I sat on the balcony with a beer, watching the city lights blink like slow-moving fireflies. The world didn't owe me anything, but it had given me something unexpected, purpose that wasn't loud, respect that wasn't bought, and peace that didn't depend on anyone's approval. I thought about my old self, the man who used to clock in, do his job, and go home thinking that was all life had to be. He was still part of me, but now I carried something he didn't have, the certainty that integrity might not pay in dollars, but it pays in dignity. I'd lost a job once for doing the right thing, but that loss turned into the foundation of everything good that came after. Funny how the same act that ended one chapter wrote the beginning of another. Months rolled by. The new safety initiative launched across 3 facilities, then 5. Each time I trained a new group, I saw the same mix of uncertainty and pride in their faces. I told them the same thing I told the first crew. Don't wait for permission to do what's right. The world already has enough people who follow the rules. It needs a few who remember why they exist. Maya would sometimes join the sessions. She'd stand in the back, quietly observing, that slight smile on her face. The one that said she remembered what it felt like to breathe again. At the end of every session, she'd shake my hand. And every time she did, I felt the same quiet gratitude between us. 2 survivors, both changed by water, both choosing not to drown in bitterness. On the anniversary of the rescue, Maya surprised me and Ellie with passes to the new community center the company had just finished building. The plaque by the entrance read, "Dedicated to those who act when others hesitate." Underneath, in smaller letters, "Inspired by the people who remind us that decency is never outdated." Ellie traced the words with her finger. "That's about you," she whispered. I looked at her and shook my head. "That's about all of us." Maya stood a few steps behind, hands in her pockets, smiling quietly. Later, as the 3 of us stood by the edge of the pool, clear, calm, the faint hum of filtration filling the air, I realized something I hadn't before. The water wasn't just a place where everything went wrong. It was the mirror where both our lives had restarted. Some people drown once and never resurface. Others come back up and spend the rest of their lives teaching others how to swim through whatever tries to pull them under. That's what we'd built. Not just a facility, but a philosophy. A reminder that doing right, even when it hurts, is how you keep your soul afloat. I reached for Ellie's hand, feeling her small fingers wrap around mine. She looked up at me, eyes reflecting the water's glow. "You happy now, Dad?" she asked again. I smiled, that deep, steady kind of smile that comes when you realize the storm is over. "Yeah, kiddo. I'm happy. You know, people always ask if I regret jumping in that day, if losing my job was worth it. And every time, I tell them the same thing. I didn't jump in because it was smart. I didn't do it because I thought anyone would notice. I did it because someone had to move. Someone had to care enough to stop watching and start acting. That's the thing about moments that define us. They don't announce themselves. They just arrive. And if you're lucky, you meet them head on. I lost a job, sure. But what I gained was a truth that stuck with me ever since. The world won't always reward you for doing right. Sometimes, it punishes you for it first. But if you stay steady, if you keep your hands clean and your conscience clear, life has a way of circling back. Sometimes it comes back in the form of forgiveness. Sometimes it comes back as peace. And sometimes, it knocks on your door wearing a business suit, giving you your life back, piece by piece. When I look at my daughter now, I know she'll grow up seeing what integrity really looks like, not in words, but in action, not in applause, but in quiet decisions that change everything. And Maya, she became more than the woman I saved. She became the proof that one brave act can ripple outward, turning fear into leadership and gratitude into purpose. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Do the right thing, even when it costs you. Especially when it costs you. Because character isn't measured by what you stand to gain. It's measured by what you're willing to lose for what's right. My name's Mark Jensen, and that's the day everything I thought I lost came back. Not as what I had before, but as what I was meant to become. Would you have done what I did? Tell me in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more real stories like mine.